Welcome to Leaders and Legends, the podcast focused on leadership and clinical trial execution. I'm your host, Patty Lushton, CEO of Diligent Pharma. In each episode, we'll get to know the individuals who are driving change and influencing the direction of our industry. Whether you're a seasoned executive yourself, an emerging leader, or simply passionate about clinical trials like I am, join us as we discuss our industry's most pressing challenges, the future of clinical trials, and hear insights and advice from the leaders who are moving our industry forward. George, welcome to Leaders and Legends.
Thanks, Patty. Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, you're the first guest of 2026.
Oh, look at
Yay.
that. Man, pressure's on.
Yeah. Well, I've been looking forward to this conversation because I really love talking to founders, and yours is such an interesting story. And I think that's where I'd really like to start. Like, if you could just talk a little bit about Patient Partner, what the challenges are that the company solves for, and then how you got this off the ground, how you started.
Yeah. I think the best way to answer that is I'll kind of go backwards and do it the other
Okay. Yeah.
way. Yeah, but prior to starting this business, I actually worked in the industry. I was on the medical device side, and I was a sales rep for probably 5, 6 years, something like that. I'm not sure if you know much about that, but basically, I worked in operating rooms helping out surgeons.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
yeah, it was actually really, really exciting, fun career. It's like I felt like every day it's kind of a unique environment to go in. Like you're not scrubbing in, but you're like literally in the OR behind the sterile theater.
Wow.
You're like helping orchestrate a
That
little.
must have been kind of intense.
So yeah, I started off doing like sports medicine, like ACL repairs, rotator cuffs, which was cool. And then I moved over to another company and I kind of carried the full bag. I did like recons, like joints, like knee replacements, hip replacements. And then I got my first taste of trauma. It was orthopedic trauma, and I fell in love with trauma. And
That is a very weird statement, George. Who
I, I
loves trauma?
I know, right? But it was I don't know, there's something exciting about it. Like what the not to spend too much time, it's like once you've seen a handful of knee replacements, hip replacements, it's all kind of like rinse and repeat. Nothing really kind of
Yeah.
is. But like with trauma, you're like somebody comes in, it's like you're problem solving for a new problem
Mm,
every time. Which I loved. It like kept me like mentally stimulated in a way. And so
yeah.
yeah, I did trauma for like 4 years. It's a little tolling though, because you're on call all the time. So I get calls at like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I had to like go to
Oh,
the
wow.
OR. Um, but yeah, so that was like my kind of like career prior to Patient Partner. But I always say like one of the benefits or like the side perks of that is like I had like unparalleled access to physicians. Like even still to this day, like I got sick like a week ago and I just called a buddy and he like, hey, this is what's going on.
Mm,
He like, okay, I'll send a Z pack to CVS. Right. Took me like 2 minutes. Like that's like the
yeah.
average person does
Great.
not have that level of connection. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it was around like 7 years ago. It was right after our second kid. My wife actually got a cancer diagnosis. Um, and I remember when we got that diagnosis and we were meeting with the oncologist, he gave us the diagnosis and then like walked us through like 4 or 5 different treatment options. And he was like going through all of them and he gets to the end, he looks at it, he goes, so what do you guys want to do? Right. And it was like this like weird, it was like such a weird feeling. Like I felt almost paralyzed in the room and like I could see my wife, like she was like crying, like we had a newborn, she was holding a newborn. Right.
Oh,
Um, And it was like one of those moments where I'm like, I don't know what the right answer is. And on top of that, I also like knew like, man, what a kind of a big decision. Like I don't want to screw it up, right? Um,
mm-hmm.
but it was like I say like the world works in funny ways because it was like 2 days after we had that like experience and consultation with the oncologist, I actually got called into clinic for work with one of my doctors. And he's like, George, I have this patient that wants to know what a knee replacement is. Can you explain to them like what a knee replacement is? Like, yeah. So I'm like walking this patient through it.
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm walking him through it, he cuts me off and he looks at the doctor and goes like, hey doc, like, I'll be honest, like I'm pretty scared and nervous about going through this procedure. But what would be really helpful is is there any chance you have like a past patient um, that you can connect me with? And I remember like sitting in the room going like, wow, what a great idea, right? Like
Yeah.
so simple.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
and so I left. I called the oncologist. I was like, hey, any chance you have a past patient that's also a mom that went through the same treatment that my wife's thinking about going through? Um, and he's like, yeah, I think I do. Like he made some phone calls. He was able to make it happen. And so my wife got introduced to one of his past patients, and they started talking like pretty much daily, phone calls, text messages, things like that. And I really got to see the impact of what we call them mentors here, but somebody who's been through the experience before can really bring to somebody who's just about to go through it. And to the point where like over like that 3 or 4 week period where my wife was trying to figure out which, road to go down, I saw this like emotional and behavior change take place. And it even took place in myself. Like when we
Mm.
got that diagnosis, it was like we're kind of scared, nervous, unsure, don't know what to do. But as she started talking with Alexis, that was her mentor, like I started to see her become more confident, more empowered, more like this like I don't know how to describe it, like maybe like an aura of like, I got this, right?
Yeah.
And she elected to move forward with her treatment. And I remember saying she's like, I would have never been able to do this if it wasn't for Alexis. And it was like one of those moments where like, why isn't this normalized? Like, why does this process
Yes.
exist? And so that's really the inspiration behind why I started the company. Um, the whole idea, it's like human nature in a way. It's like healthcare is really personal. It's really intimate. It's like something that's like some people like really, it's like an important aspect of people's lives, but I feel like it can be so siloed and lonely going through different
Y-
healthcare journeys. And so
Yeah.
being able to
Yeah.
have a mentor to talk to is can really helpful.
I mean, especially in a moment when you're getting news and it's overwhelming and it's scary. You're faced with decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah, that it's especially a difficult environment. And so well, that's incredible. I want to ask, how is your wife doing today?
Oh, yeah. 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 Great question. She's doing great. So,
Good.
um, every, actually, some good news. So, like, well, actually, I'll tell you a couple pieces of it. One is, so this was after when we, when that happened, that was after our second kid. And as she went through treatment, I remember the doctor saying, like, there's a chance you might not be able to have any more kids. Right. Um, Proud to say we now have 4 kids. So, Dr. Joel,
Oh,
right?
congrats.
Yeah. But like every a year and a half, every 2 years, you have to go back and like do some testing to make sure everything's fine.
Sure.
She
Yeah.
did that like I want to say maybe a month ago, and she was, we're both kind of like nervous, but like nothing's gonna happen. And we actually have the results back. All's good. So
Great.
so yeah, she's
Yeah.
doing really well. Thank you for asking.
And when was this? When did you launch the company? What year was that?
So I launched it in like 2019, roughly.
Okay.
So my co-founder Pat and I got together and we were actually working on something that was slightly different than Patient Partner back in like 2017, 2018. Um, but the concept was still the same. We were still like connecting patients, but it was just for different reasons. And then like
Right.
this kind of happened, and we're like, this makes more sense. Um, and so like the real idea and the concept of Patient Partner didn't really happen until like 2019.
Yeah. So I think what's going through my mind is that you are launching a business at a time when you have little kids, an infant, and a wife who just got a very scary
Yeah.
diagnosis. And so, talk about that. How, like, just having the sort of mental fortitude to even go down that path, because some people would think, well, this is an interesting idea, but I have a pretty good job and
Oh yeah.
I probably should just, stick with what I'm doing. So talk a little bit about just
Yeah.
how you made that decision.
Well, okay. I'm gonna kind of go back even further.
Good.
Um, so when when I when I was in college, so I met my wife in college, and we were dating in college. And when I graduated, uh, literally like a month after I found out she was pregnant, and we were we were broke as could be, and
So you're what, 20,
yeah,
21,
yeah,
something like that?
like
Yeah.
I was 21, man.
Mhm.
And man, it was like kind of reality hit me pretty fast. Like I was, we had a ton of fun in college, kind of a little bit of a party animal, and then you graduate. I was like trying to get a job, and then this happens, and it was like, man, I kind of have to like grow up pretty fast. Like I now have a family kind of relying on me. Because my wife
Mhm.
was still in school at that time,
Okay.
and she ended up putting a pause on school, and she finished school later in life, which is great.
Hmm.
But I remember, it was really tough because I went through several periods where I really, like, couldn't keep a job. Like, I would get hired, get fired, and we were I mean, from a financial standpoint, like, barely scraping by. Like, we were on every government-funded type of subsidy you can get, right? And but, kinda going through, like, that medical device journey I was just sharing about, like, I went from, being in a financial state where it's like we could barely afford groceries in a way, right? To, all of a sudden, like I started becoming really successful in that field. And it was tough because, my wife saw all stages of that.
Right.
And we were doing really well to the point where, we had a pretty good size like nest egg. We're about to go buy a house. We're like house shopping, it's like
Hmm. Yeah.
really fun. And then I remember, like, I had this, like, really tough conversation with her where I'm like, "Dev," I'm like, "I hate to tell you this, but I don't think we can buy a house." She's like, "What do you mean? Like, why not?" I'm like, "Well, I really believe in this idea, in this business, but it's gonna take me like, I think it's gonna take me a year and a half to try to figure it out, and we're
Mhm.
gonna need that money to keep the family afloat." And, I think in her mind, it was like, "Oh god, am I gonna go back to where we first were?" Right? And,
Yeah.
you know, it was a huge she saw it as, like, kind of as a huge risk, but I think she also understood the opportunity of the concept in the business, and she ended up supporting me, but man, it was, like, a really challenging decision, especially knowing that, like, look at where we were. We're in this
Right.
really great financial space. We're buying a house, blah, blah. And then, like, oh man, George, you're going to quit your job and you're going to risk it all on something that you like. It's kind of a bet in a way. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, that was a tough, that was a tough moment, I would say.
Yeah, but you made that decision. So, what were you drawing on? Was it just self-confidence? Was it instinct? Was it the fact that you were in a place of financial insecurity and you figured it out? So, you know, like, what was sort of the decision process? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people listening who either want to start a business, thought about starting a business, but then they're faced with that decision of like just kind of like a little bit of fear of the unknown and the concerns around the financial instability.
Yeah, man. So I mean, I guess there's a lot of emotions going into this. There's like one of like kind of what you said, like, well, I know what kind of rock bottom looks like, and don't want to go back there, but at least I know what it's like.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but for me, it was, and I guess this might be more of a selfish answer because like my wife and I are a team for everything. But for me, it was I'm always looking for like m- mental stimulation in a way. And when I was at my med device stuff, it was great, but I just felt as though I wasn't like growing professionally, personally, mentally, all of that. And then I always, even like throughout my entire life, might be a characteristic or something like that, but I like to bet on myself. And, there's always this sense where it's like, even if you have a stable job, you could wake up one morning, like I see it all the time in the industry I work in, like people who work at a company 20 years and they wake up one morning with an email saying, you're part of a layoff. And you're like, I was loyal to this company 20 years. And they just get an email saying like,
Yeah.
"What?"
Right.
um, so it was a bit of like me going, I want to make a bet on myself, but then also like I tell people this too, like there's a correlation with this where it's like, um, at my age and age group and all my friends, it's like everybody always like thinks like, "Oh, I'm not gonna have a kid right now. I'll wait till, I'm in a better financial spot to then have children." And I'm like,
I know,
and
I
and I'm always
know.
like,
I was talking to my husband about that not too
"Yeah,
long ago. People do wait because they're trying to plan everything out and just make sure
but it's
whereas
never right."
we were just like, I don't know, it just there
Yeah,
wasn't that kind of thought process, I guess.
but it's like, oh, you'll always come up with an excuse for why it's not the right time.
Exactly.
And so, but for me, like I looked at this and I go, this is an opportunity. I kind of owe it to the opportunity. I have undeniable belief in the concept of this idea and like the product company, the mission, all of that. And like, I need to make a bet on myself. Like, I believe in myself,
Mhm.
believe in this company, and I believe in this idea. Cause, at the time it wasn't really a company, it was like an idea. Right. Um,
Yeah,
and, my wife is obviously very supportive of everything that I do. And, I think she also has personal ties to the idea and the concept of it.
of course. Yeah.
But yeah, like it was for me, it was like, I want to bet on myself. And then if I don't do this now, I think I'm going to regret it in the future. And the idea of like, oh, it's not the right time. I would always tell myself that if I didn't do it. So it was like, I don't want to call it like a burn the boat type of philosophy, but I felt like some of the stars kind of aligned.
Yeah.
And like if I didn't have the that like piggy bank to kind of get the family afloat, I feel like that would have really hindered the opportunity. So like everything was kind
Mhm.
of in place to do it. And it was more of just like, all right, I just need to make sure that if I do this, I go all in
Yeah.
and I don't have like a parachute in case. It's like the concept, you're familiar with the burn the boats concept, right? Um
Yeah.
so so yeah, it's but man, it was a really tough decision. I don't even know how else to describe it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just keep thinking about how you're sort of the consummate entrepreneur, right? Just the idea of just having such conviction and passion about bringing an idea to life and seeing it come to fruition. And of course, with such a sort of a noble purpose based on personal experience. But this whole concept of just betting on yourself, I think, it's sort of what it's kind of what that's sort of the formula for founders, and you kind of have to have that right in order to start something, start a business. And how did you get traction? Like, what was the you know, first, engagement or, how long did it take?
Oh man, this is a funny story. Uh okay, so when we did this, so me and my co-founder Patrick, we do not have a technical background at all. And so but we knew like the product itself, like this is going to be a tech platform.
Yeah.
But we're like we were like as bootstrapped as can be. We didn't want to spend a ton of money. We didn't want to hire somebody. So like what we did is we built. Have you ever heard of a website builder called Wix? You ever heard?
No.
So it's
Mm-mm.
like a Foursquare. It's like this like drag and drop website builder thing.
So
And
any is it related to wiki pages?
no, no, no,
Is
no.
that No, that's different. Okay.
People are like, "Oh, I wanna go build a website," and you go and you buy a subscription and, like,
Oh,
it's
okay.
like drag and drop, you can move things around. So,
I see.
we, um, we knew, like, okay, if we're gonna do this, we're gonna have to try to go and raise some money, and on top of that, we're gonna have to get, like, at least, like, some, like, LOIs from somebody, right? And so we built this, like, incredibly crappy, like, MVP facade of what we want the product to be. And it was so crappy where, like, when I did demos, I knew exactly which buttons to click because no other buttons worked on the page, right? And so, like, I would have to, like, it felt almost like Wizard of Ozzy, where you're just like, "Oh, I know exactly which buttons to make this work." And if I click the wrong one, it kinda screws the whole thing up. So we ended up going and, um, trying to sell this. We actually got interest from, I went to the industry I knew best, which was med device. I went back to the med device industry trying to sell this. We actually got some traction, some, like, people who are interested. Nobody would sign an LOI. I think that's more of just, like, a big corporate thing,
Mhm.
um, but we're like, "Hey, I think we can go raise some capital." And we're like, "Well, we wanna raise $2 million to try to go and, like, really kind of, make this a bit more realistic than just us, sitting together in a garage trying to make it work." And so we started fundraising at the beginning of 2020, and we met with one of our, well, who is now our first investor, and they gave us a term sheet for $1 million, and I remember when we got that, we're like, right, we're like, oh way, like no no no, we're the first time ever seeing a term sheet, um, and we made one of the biggest mistakes, which is like, oh, we're gonna negotiate this. Like, we're, like, watching YouTube videos, like, how to negotiate a term sheet, right? Because we didn't know anything. Like, um, and we were negotiating it. We got the I'll never forget, we got the term sheet on Valentine's Day. It was, like, February 14th. Because I remember I drove up to the, investor's office, and I gave him a bottle of wine. It was like, how we start the relationship. I don't know. I made something like correlation to something romantic or something like that, um and we were negotiating it, and then I remember in March, beginning of March, like, the whole world was starting to, like, shift,
Oh,
right? This is, like,
yeah.
COVID.
This is March 2020,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And we're, like, watching the news, we're like, "We need to sign this thing now." And so I remember I called him. I'm like, "Hey, we're good to go, we're ready to sign." He's like, "Well, George, things have changed." And I'm like, "Oh, no, here we go." He's like, "So, I'll give you 250K, but then if you're able to raise more money, I'll match whatever they match." And we're like,
Ugh,
no VC
yeah,
was deploying capital at that time because of all the
right.
uncertainty. But we're like, "All right, we still have a term sheet for $1 million." So we went and hired our, because we were like, "We need to hire, like, an engineer. We need to hire somebody to actually build the product." So we went and, told our CTO that we had $1 million when we didn't. And, I think his salary was pretty much the entire 250 that we had. So Pat and I didn't pay ourselves, kind of as planned. But we're like, okay, we're gonna go and build something, but we gotta sell it. We gotta sell something. And I remember we worked our butts off, and we ended up within like a couple months getting a contract with Medtronic. They're still good customer of ours today. And it was like, I want to say it was for like I think 200 to 300K or something like that. But it was
Okay.
like one of those things where like, oh my God, like we did it. And I remember we like
Yeah,
got it signed and we like ran back to like that one investor. We're like, look, like it's not us. Like we're not just like blowing smoke. Like this is real. And I think he was absolutely floored. I think he was just
right.
like, is this thing fake? Like, you know what I mean? Uh, but he then was like, okay, I'm all in. And he actually filled the entire round for us.
Oh,
But it was
wow.
like one of those moments where you're like, okay, we had to pretend that we were a larger company than we were to kind of get it deal with Medtronic, and then we got it,
Mhm.
and it was like from there we're like, okay, we kind of like we have proof point, and
Yeah.
that allowed us to fill the first round, man, I still to this day, I am so grateful for like that first investor, even though he put us in a kind of a tough
Oh,
spot. Totally understand it, but it's like
yeah.
back against the wall, bet on yourself. We got, you know, term sheet for 1,000,000, even though we don't have 1,000,000. Um, and it was like, we have to make this work. We have no other option. We're not going back to like, we're not quitting. We're not going back to our old jobs. Like, we will figure out how to make this work. And we knew like the validation point is not users, blah, blah, blah. It's like, can we get a customer? And that was like our North Star. We were fortunate enough to get one within like, I think it was like 5 or 6 months starting. And I look at like where it's like stars aligned or like, how did this like ever happen to us? But I think it
Yeah.
just goes down to like the grit and perseverance of like the us three sitting in a garage trying to make this work.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, I think too about early clients and, the organizations that believed in us very early on. And it's so important because when I think about starting my first company and then of course Diligent, I never really think about it as, oh, I took a big risk because I just wouldn't put my family at risk. I kind of had, backup plans and this and that. You did too, I'm sure. But if you think about the first clients, where you don't have all the case studies and the success stories and the proof points, in some ways they're the ones taking the risks. They're believing in the vision, and
Totally.
that is so huge. And it's also so important for driving innovation, right? Like if there were no early adopters, or first, it just we would be stuck. Anyway, I really resonate with that. I want to talk a little bit about how patient partner kind of transitioned into the clinical trial space.
Yeah.
Could you share a little bit about that and sort of where you're at with
Yeah.
that right now?
Okay, so I'll kind of tell it in a bit more of a story form, but like, so Medtronic, we worked with their bariatric division, weight loss, and I'll never forget we got invited to like one of their national sales meetings, and I remember one of the topics was like our biggest competitor, and I go and sit in the talk, and I was gonna think it's like one of their like Ethicon or whatever, but it was like the first couple slides were like, they have more money than us. They go direct to patient, like no surgery required. And I'm like, look there. And then it was like Ozempic. And I'm like, what the hell's Ozempic? Right. And I was like, oh man. And so that was like my first introduction to the pharmaceutical world. And so I remember sitting there and going like texting Pat, like, dude, whatever we're doing right now, turn all energy to pharma. Right. And so we ended up, this was like in late 2022, early 2023. And I remember we were like, okay, I think there's a big need in the pharmaceutical world for this. Uh, Kind of again, just like started knocking on doors. We had no connections in pharma. We're like trying to figure this out. Like the terminology too is also hilarious. Learned all about the pharma acronyms. There's,
Oh,
there's how,
it's a different language, right? That you
like,
had to
every-
become fluent in.
yeah. But,
Yeah,
but we ended up working, getting our first couple of clients in the pharmaceutical space, but on the commercial side. So like commercial brands, branded drugs, things like that.
I see. Yeah.
But with one of our customers, they were gearing up for like a label expansion for one of their therapies. And I remember talking to them, and we're all like kind of waiting. And they're like, George, our trial is not going as quickly as we need it to be. They're like, you guys, as your product can totally help with this. And I remember in that meeting going like, what's a clinical trial? Right. uh,
I both love this and love you for this story, but I also hate you because there are so many companies that are actually trying to get into the right people, the decision makers and clinical trial execution with great ideas. And essentially what you're saying is you were there and they came to you to say, hey, how can we apply what you've built in our world?
We literally
It's
fell in
pretty cool.
we
Pretty
fell
cool.
and, like, I look at there's a not to deviate too far, but, like, I get asked a lot, like, how much of the success of Patient Partner has been, like, skill, hard work, or luck? I felt like there's been so many times we've been in the right place at the right time, and there's a lot of luck. People would argue with me and go, like, "You're there because you put the hard work in," but, like, you're totally right. There's, like, times where it's like, "Oh, man, I would just happen to be at the right spot."
Yeah.
But, yeah, that's literally how we got our first take into the clinical trial space. But the concept of what we do is very, very similar. It's like it's not like we changed a product or built something new. It's like, okay, on clinical trials, there are it is so common for patients to be hesitant, fearful, concerned, nervous to even enroll in a trial, right? Whether it's the time commitment, whether it's the burden of actually enrolling in a trial, or it's just like the nature of being scared, like, am I gonna be like a lab rat, right? Uh,
Yeah.
but if you talk to somebody who's been through a trial and you hear the story that they share and almost like the level of pride that they have, because it takes a ton of courage to join a trial. Um, you it's very inspiring. And for those who are like on the fence and being able to actually talk with somebody, mentors themselves, they're not coercing people into the trial, they're not motivating, but it's like they're
Right.
sharing the journey. And I think that's what a lot of people are missing. They're like, what does it mean? Right? Obviously, you hear the informed consent and all that stuff, but it's like, what's the lived experience? And I think that's a very big missing gap right now. I'm not saying we're like the only solution for it, but like I think it's a very powerful way for people to understand the trial experience. Um, and so, yeah, where we sit right now in the clinical space is we help tons of study teams on the recruitment side, and then we also help a ton of study teams on the retention side. So when somebody enrolls, how do we make sure that they feel supported? How do we make sure that patients don't feel isolated or siloed as they go through what could be a really long trial? And that would ultimately lead them to either, drop out or something like that. And so having a companion there who totally understands what it's like is very, very powerful.
Yeah. Well, the value is huge. I mean, it's huge for the sponsors of clinical trials, obviously, but just for clinical research in general, having patients talking to other patients about their experiences with clinical trial execution sort of addresses some of the things that I've talked about on this podcast with others, just the reputation sometimes that the pharma industry has and some of the misunderstandings that patients have going into these things. So, I think that's tremendous. I am curious if you could just talk briefly about just the mechanics of this, right? Because, I mean, you're providing something that a pharma company can't do. They can't, call up a patient and say, "Hey, talk to this patient." So this is a very unique service. But how does it work via the platform
Yeah.
and the technology? How does that kind of get initiated? That engagement.
Yeah. So it really depends on the study team and what their strategy is, whether it's for recruitment or retention. Most of the times, almost all the time, we're educating the sites themselves. So investigators,
Okay.
coordinators, explaining to them the value of what a program like this could actually bring back to their site. Because that's really a lot of place where this program actually gets introduced to patients. And
Hmm.
so, but let's say a study coordinator talks to them and goes, "Hey, I think it'd be really helpful for you to connect with somebody and talk with somebody," right? The first step for them, once they hit like, they scan a QR code and they go like to a landing page. One of the first things that we do is we really need to understand who this person is. Because our whole mantra here is like, we don't want to just connect somebody based off a disease state. We don't want to say, George has diabetes and John has diabetes, let's connect them. We're like, No, we really need to understand what makes them unique because what we're trying to find is degrees of relatability. And so we send them through this like matching questionnaire, and we actually have a patent on it. But what it is, it's really kind of defined, like we define relatability in like three pillars. There's like a healthcare and clinical pillar. There's a personal demographic pillar, and then there's a psychological pillar. So everything from understanding their experience with the disease, where they're at, to what makes them unique, what are the things that they enjoy, what's their activity level, things like that. And then
Wow.
the last is understanding like situationally where they are in life. Why are they concerned? Are they nervous? What's their hesitation? Are they joining a trial for some particular reason? Is it for family? Is it to spend more time with their spouse? Is it to get back to work or, whatever it is, right? All of that will help us understand who is going to be the best mentor for this individual, right? Because what we find is when you get connected with somebody, we really want to make sure that there are so many degrees of relatability that a lot of conversations are, as much as they do talk about the disease state of the trial, but they're also talking about life, right? Being able to match somebody who has kids, or like, let's say somebody enjoys snowboarding and we put somebody with, connecting with somebody who surfs, like, how can we get them to the point where it's really more of a bond and a relationship? And I think that's really important in building trust and building a relationship in a fast and effective way.
That is so interesting. I didn't realize that you were capturing all these psychometrics and
Yeah.
doing that kind of matching. That's so cool. I just think back on, I had a rare disease diagnosis, and one of the things that the um, the physician said is, "Oh, you're not going to meet anybody that, has this diagnosis." So he said there's probably, some, maybe there's some patient groups. He was learning about it himself. And so, you go onto these sites with patient groups. It was making me more nervous because you read about all these like horror stories and like kind of information that doesn't necessarily, it's not contextualized in
Yeah.
any way. And, I remember saying like, "Hey, like, don't you have another patient?" It's so interesting. What you were talking earlier, I was just thinking back on my own experience. Like, isn't there somebody that I could talk to? There really wasn't at the time. I'm sure now, there's more, and
Yeah.
I have access to more people, and but the way you're connecting the dots here is just incredible. And as I said, huge value for the industry and for patients themselves. We're coming up on time here. I could talk to you for forever, George, but I guess I just like to end by just asking, like, what are you excited about moving forward? Both personally and also with patient partner.
Yeah. Personally, um, I have 4 kids, and they're all
What are their ages? Yeah, how
yeah.
old are they?
So I have a 10-year-old, um, about to be 7-year-old. My daughter's birthday is on Saturday, so she's 6, about to be 7.
Nice.
Um, and then I have a 2, about to be 3-year-old, and then I have, she's like 9 or 10 months right now. Um, and it's like, personally, it's really fun. Like with my 10-year-old, I feel like I'm always learning something new because like hey, I don't know what it's like to have a 12-year-old. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I'm always the things that are always going on in our house. But what's really fun is like the uniqueness with each one of my kids, and each one has different, you know, skills and different things that they enjoy. And so it's actually kind of broadening me a little bit. Like my son is super athletic. He's in like 4 or 5 sports at a time. Love going to all that. I did coaching, and like I was very familiar with that. That's like kind of how I grew up. My daughter's very different. Like she's more, I call her more of an intellect. Like, loves to read. Loves to she calls herself the crafter. She's a big crafter. So like our house is like
Ah,
really filled with like construction paper, and anytime she sees a
awesome.
new Amazon box, she like turns it into something. Like her creativity is inspiring. It really is. But it's like I'm
Yeah.
having to learn, like, for her birthday, she wants to go to a tea party. I've never been to a tea party. You know what I mean? So it's like, uh,
It's great.
yeah. So personally, I love that aspect of it. And it's always like something new. And My house is like never quiet. uh, but on the professional side, what I'm trying to accomplish, really trying to shoot for two things, which I think will be very, very cool. One is I have this like dream on the clinical side where we have we have these like networks and groups of patients who are they're very engaged, and this might be a pipe dream, but I like the idea behind this is being able to build a cohort of patients within a disease state to help a sponsor build a protocol, and they build it in tandem. And I know this like right now this totally exists and happens and things like that, but using that base of that community of patients to help build the protocol, and then actually having that group of patients then be the participants in that study. And so they're building that study with how they would want that study to
Mm.
be built, right? And to me, the way I think of, and this is more like hypothetical, it's you would never have a recruitment problem and you wouldn't have a retention problem because the people who built it are the ones who are in it, right?
Yeah.
Um, and to me, I think that's super powerful. Like that is the true patient centricity is a huge. Everybody likes to talk about it, blah blah
Yeah,
blah.
right. Buzzword, right.
How do we actually do that? Like we have the capability to kind of help orchestrate that. We're not a sponsor. We're not sites, so we didn't. Operationally, we can't put it all together. But like when I look at the structure of it, like there are several ways that patient partner can play a role in making this a reality. And I think that could be really, really powerful. And who knows if will ever come to fruition or if somebody will actually take a bet on that, something like that. But there's that piece of it. And then the other piece that I know that we can accomplish, and we're kind of teeing ourselves up to do this is right now. So, kind of what I mentioned, we're on like two different sides of pharma. We're on the commercial side and clinical side. The the line in that separation tends to be a really hard line. They don't talk to each other.
Mhm.
They don't really know
Right.
what's going on.
Yes.
And I look at it and go, man, imagine if we're able to help for either recruitment or retention with like a phase 3. We have all those patients and then bridge the gap over to commercial, right? And so now all of a sudden we have all of these patients who have been through it to help the commercial team understand how to position, market, blah, blah, all the product. And to me, I want to accomplish that. I think that's super exciting. I think that's a way to escalate and, you know, there's a different way they're gonna bring their drug to market in a different way, which I think is really
Absolutely.
exciting. So,
Yeah.
sorry to
Well,
go on and on
that's
about it, but
no, it's awesome. I'd love to talk with you about both of those ideas because I think they both have merit and is especially the um using a platform to create a bridge within organizations with silos because I think that's what we're also seeing in the world that we play in and I think that platforms actually have that capability and there's power there. And so let's talk offline
yeah,
because I think there's a lot to unlock in terms of potential. And George, thank you so much. This was great. Congratulations on all your success. And I really appreciate you spending time with
yeah,
me today.
thanks for inviting me. This has been fun. I felt like I hogged the conversation, but hopefully it was,
That's what you're supposed to do. That's the whole idea. So no, it's great. Yeah, we'll talk soon.
cool. Thanks, Matt.